Right, I think we're live. Hello everyone, it's Katie Montgomery. Thanks for joining us. Please let me know in the comments as soon as possible if the sound is good for both of us, because I'm paranoid about it now. Anyway, today I'm here with Jangles ScienceLad. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin. I have a YouTube channel called Jangles ScienceLad, where I make some videos. I do lots of debates and generally just make a big fuss of things. And I'm not very good at it yet, but I still push on regardless.
You are good at it. Yeah, so I put his links to his Twitter and YouTube below, so you should go and both subscribe to those. Oh, is there an echo? Apparently there's an echo for you.
Of course there is.
Let me think of an option quickly. Oh no! Maybe
there has to be.
Maybe if I switch to headphones, that might help.
Yeah, everybody got it. I'm living in an echo chamber. It's being physically manifested on this stream right now.
Right, everyone, has the echo gone now that I've switched to headphones? Can you let us know as soon as possible?
Echo. Is it still there?
I really hope not.
We were talking about this earlier. It's not a true Zoom call if you don't start with 20 to 30 technical difficulties at the start of it. So.
Yeah, I haven't blue screened yet. My internet hasn't cut out yet, so that's all a success. Just a minor terrible sound problem. Let's just check.
Okay, yeah, it looks okay, just based on what I'm seeing now. So.
Okay, cool. Right, well, we'll press on, and I'll just briefly check it in a second. Yeah. So anyway, as Justin was saying, he does lots of arguing online, which I guess if you know who I am, I also do a lot of arguing online. I spend a horrible amount of time on Twitter arguing with people like anyone and everyone about feminism and LGBT issues, and Justin argues with lots of people about lots of things. Like what would you say summarizes your main focus? Like leftist issues, or because you seem to cover a lot of topics.
So my Twitter handle is SJW Debates, and that is not a lie. It was a painful truth. So social justice warrior debates, a painful truth. Picked at 3:00 in the morning. So I focus mostly on social issues. So I've done a lot of trans content. So a lot of the science and stuff about transitioning, a lot of like debunking a lot of transphobe lies and things of that nature. So trans is a big one. Also like comedy. It doesn't show up a whole lot because not a whole lot of people are arguing about comedy, but it's a big passion of mine. Yeah, a lot of social issues, mostly like LGBT stuff, racism, things like that. So that's where most of the focus is. I am an absolute pleb when it comes to like economics, so I don't even try.
Right.
With
okay.
that.
Yeah. So I think I was aware of you from Twitter and a few other things, but the thing that I sort of first became majorly aware of you was in the build up to the like Milo debate. So you debated Milo. How do you say his second name? Yiannopoulos?
Yiannopoulos, I think, yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know, he several years ago was like one of the main internet figures for like the outright, I guess. And he was kind of like an internet celebrity, and he was on everything saying all this kind of nonsense, and he was famous for like debating college students and destroying them with facts and logic, a bit like Ben Shapiro, I guess.
But Ben Shapiro with the pearl necklace, yeah.
Yeah, and he's also a lot less restrained than Ben Shapiro. Like he's ready to be spicier and be horrible to people and destroy them and stuff. Personally, I think, and he kind of disappeared because he got blocked from everything, like Twitter and YouTube and all these different things. And then he like made this comeback, and somehow you were like the person who made the comeback with him, I guess. Like how did that even happen?
A very, very complicated process. So Modern Day Debate, which is who hosted that debate, paid Milo $500 to appear on their platform and debate him, and then they sent out a tweet asking, "Hey, is anybody willing to debate this firebrand conservative?" And then someone tagged me in it, and then they asked me, and then I did it.
Okay.
That's the entirety of the story. I wish it was. I wish there was like some more lore to that, but that's exactly what happened. Now, to be fair, like they didn't like say who it was. They told me in DMs, and
Okay.
then I was like,
So
no, they got to plus like we're gonna do this.
yeah, because so I guess so. The main topic of this video that I wanted to discuss is how to deal with the fallout and the stress and the pressure of arguing against, or arguing for what you believe in, I guess, but particularly arguing against these kind of people. And I think the Milo thing is quite a good example because he at least was very big. I mean, definitely a bigger internet profile than either of us. And I mean, I guess he still is. People still know who he is. And he's also got a lot of like total shithead followers. And so when you found out that you were just kind of like half agreed to debate him, like what were you nervous about the fallout? Was that like something you were considering or?
Definitely. Now it wasn't like the first big debate I had in that arena, so it wasn't my first. I wish I had another phrase. It wasn't my first rodeo. That's just overused.
Yeah.
But it's always something in the back of your mind, especially when you're going over someone who is very contentious, who has a large follower base, who's known to be extremely toxic and very likely to target people. And of course, if it was just me, that's one thing. But obviously, I'm married, and my husband doesn't need to deal with any of that stuff. So it's always something in the back of your mind. But I don't know. I can't really tell you 100% why you push through. It might be ego. I'd like to think it's because I genuinely believe in the causes and topics that I talk about. I'd like to say that. Also, there is a little bit of ego involved there. Yeah, the only way I can say to go against it, the better example would be when I went on a white nationalist podcast called The Kill Stream a few months before that
I
to
have
debate.
heard of that actually, but I think
It is a white nationalist podcast, plain and simple, and they had on a Nazi named Vincent James. That is as bad as things could, about as bad as things can get. You're going on to
it's quite
a
dangerous.
platform. Yeah, you're going on to a very, very hostile platform with someone with a lot of media training, a lot of financial backing, who's there to have disingenuous arguments, and that is about the worst experience you can go into. And if you look at that video on my, it's still up on my channel, like disliked bomb, like hundreds and hundreds of comments calling me the worst things in the world. Like most of them get like auto deleted because, of course, I think at some point I mentioned that I was gay in that podcast.
Right.
You can imagine what the Nazis say about that.
Yeah. Well, which is obviously very pathetic that you go on to present your ideas. It doesn't actually matter who or what you are, but the second you mention like that you're something they don't like, then that's all they talk about, and
Yep.
that's kind of telling because really, if you went on their thing and you said, "Oh, your opinion's wrong," and you gave a reason for it, and they could come on and say, "Actually, white nationalism is great," then they would be doing that. But they can't, so instead they just have to be like, "Ooh, gay."
That almost helps a little bit because I mean you're absolutely right. If you presented arguments that were bad, and they would be attacking those, but instead, half the time they just point out like your physical appearance.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Like, I mean, I'm. Never mind. I'm not
Beard,
terrible
he's got a
looking.
beard.
Yeah, he's got a beard. Which beards are simultaneously like the most masculine thing and like the least masculine thing. But of course, even in the year of our Lord 2020, soy cuck, soy cuck, three separate words. I'm also, and this may surprise absolutely no one, been called Jewish very, very often, because the second they start going after your character, it's an amalgamation of everything they hate.
Yeah.
Everything has to be this immense conspiracy. To back. Like all the bad people are in cahoots, and every single person they see who are saying the bad things, like racism is bad, like trans people are valid, all the bad evil things, all the evil people are in on. The Jewish Marxist soy cucks are all in cahoots with each other, and that's the only way these ideas could be being propagated. It can't be because they're good. It has to be that someone is like funding these.
Yeah. There has to be some other secret motivation behind it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely get similar things often when I post a post on Twitter that gets big enough, you always get like some shithead who has to make some point about me being trans, or some point about my appearance. That's quite common. This whole like, you get like whole cruises, whole like forums and stuff where they take a photo of a trans woman and just sort of tear it apart, and that's like their life.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing happens a lot, and in a way, like you say, that's not the worst part of it, because perhaps in a way my self-worth is sadly a bit more locked up in my appearance than it is for maybe some other people, because transition is a very like focused on your appearance thing. But generally when people come at you with just calling you names or something, it's just kind of, sometimes it's funny. Like they'll come up with this thing that, like, if someone calls you like soy cuck, like tranny or something, I just think like, all right, mate.
Like I don't understand. Like I don't understand the soy comment. Like like how has that been a thing for so long?
It's so ridiculous. I think one of the best takedowns of it that I saw is like, trans people have been around for thousands of years, and if soy increased your estrogen levels, we'd flipping know about it. Like
We'd know about it.
That is all the trans women would eat, just like soy and nothing else. And unfortunately, it doesn't work. So
Yeah, I think so in activism, and I'm by no means saying that I'm a well-known or even good activist. I try to be, but such as it is. But I think one of the reasons why it's so difficult is because if you're on the left, so to me, the definition of a social justice warrior or a social justice advocate, if you want to use actual terminology, is about addressing inequalities in society right now. So it's essentially fighting against the status quo. And so it is always an uphill battle because one, the status quo is a status quo because it's entrenched into like the popular zeitgeist. It is there for a reason, and you're trying to fight against it, and people are going to hold on to things that are comfortable. Like it's not, to me, the biggest obstacle in any sort of social justice advocacy is one, pronunciation of words, and two, fighting against not bigotry but complacency, but comfort.
Sure. That's
to me
classic. It's the classic Martin Luther King quote, isn't it? Like, the biggest resistance that black people have to equality is the white moderate.
Yeah, and I truly do believe that, based on like all the research I've done on like systems and things like that. It's not the outright bigots that are the biggest problem. It's the just person who values comfort over everything else, which is most people. Yeah. So that's the hard part. There's also a lot of research to say that anybody that's way more than like a conservative advocate, and this makes absolutely no sense if you think about it, but it's just what the research says. Someone who is fighting against the status quo, people are far more likely to attribute malicious intent to them than anyone else.
Right.
Like,
yes.
So you can have two advocates, both of which are trying to like, hey, I want the exact same amount of money. I'm fighting for some sort of change to the system, but one is changing things in favor of the status quo, which is a thing that can exist. Yeah. And when somebody else is like changing things to fight the status quo, people will, by and large, always attribute malicious intent to the person trying to fight the status quo, because the status quo, that's what I know. You're trying to fight against me. You're trying to say that the values that I grew up with are bad. Like, you must not be a good person, or something to that effect. I'm representing the academic research very poorly here.
No.
You're just gonna have to take my word that it exists.
No, I can feel that, and I think especially when it is like you say, like social justice warrior causes, often that's then like compounded with like, it's a gay person who's fighting against the status quo, so you've got to go up against the general like status quo reaction, and then also the fact that like you're different and new, and also the fact that like homophobia in general, and there's lots of things that can stack up to make it much easier to be fighting for the status quo, even like apart from the fact that people also are more ready to support the status quo.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like politics, I think a lot of people view politics as just another form of being a team sport. Like you have your team that you always root for, and you always root against the other team. It's a lot more like abstract than what it is in people's minds. Like what it is an enormously complex system that affects every facet of your life. But a lot of us think it, and I'm very much guilty of this as well. We think of it as just this thing we see on TV, and it very rarely trickles down to us.
Right.
And it's our team that we root for, and then against the other team. And so, wouldn't it be awesome if we could stop caring about it, because it'll stop affecting us? And that's another big thing that makes advocacy so hard. It's just that indifference, that like,
Yeah.
nothing you do seems to get people to care.
And it is horrible. Like, I often think I don't want anything to do with politics, and in a way I'm very lucky that I can just disappear from it in many senses, because I can, I've got a great support network, I've got a good job, I've got enough money, and I'm a white person, and I pass reasonably well, and all these other things which make my life quite easy to escape from politics. And I think that I had a period earlier this year where like 3 horrible politics things happened all at once, and there was this kind of overhanging thing that potentially the government was going to try and push to ban trans women from women's toilets in the UK. And just the idea that there was this thing that I couldn't escape at all, like hanging over me, it was horrifying. And there was so much I just didn't want to engage with it. I didn't want to do anything, and I felt like I had to. But I can having this feeling, I've felt that before, because I felt like, I just want this to go away, and I take my time out and then step back into discussing politics. And I can so see why someone who's never experienced that at all in any sense, like as soon as they get like a taste of it, they're like, oh, it's horrible. No, I don't want anything to do with politics. So let's just keep this apolitical, which of course itself is like a political stance.
Yeah, apolitical is it just means status quo. I'm not going to challenge the status quo at all. That's essentially what that means.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's all it can mean, really, isn't it? It's like,
yep.
Which is very frustrating. And like sometimes, I mean, I do understand it in a way, but particularly when fighting for like LGBT issues, and like the classic is like in a computer game, there'll be like a trans person or something, and they'll get offended because it's politics. And it's like, well, no. If it was apolitical, then 0.3% of all video game characters would be trans, just at random. And anything different from that is a political statement. So really, you should be fighting for more trans characters. But obviously, that won't wash.
Yeah, it's like it's like they've done absolutely no research, and they have no idea how hard that a lot of creators for these big shows have to fight to include any sort of diverse representation in media. Like, that's the real politics. Like, they're afraid of including, a same-sex kiss in a video game or a TV show or something like that, because it might not play well to the audience. That's political. Like, but that's that's behind the scenes stuff. So every episode you see without a gay character, without my dang representation in every single episode of every sort of TV show, there's an element of politics to that as well, because everything is political.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I guess so. Going back to what we were saying about like dealing with the fallout from it, and saying about like the sort of motivation to keep going. One of the things that does keep me going is this kind of fear of how it does directly affect me and my friends. And in that way, like the fallout that I face isn't optional. Do you feel that kind of drive? Is there anything that you feel like is kind of on the line for you personally, or?
Well, definitely, my marriage to my husband. So I live in a very red state. Very, very red state. So if like, for example, gay marriage was back, as a state's decision, unquestionably gone in a heartbeat. My state is like Mitch McConnell's state as well. So yeah, it's gone in a heartbeat. I also have a lot of friends. I have a lot of Black friends, a lot of trans friends that I know. They've moved a bit over the country, but most of which are still like pretty close to me where I grew up. And so of course I care about them as well. And it's also like a lot of it's personal, and a lot of it's just like, I like good things, and I don't like bad things. And I feel like, I know, very controversial. I don't know. And I've always liked to argue. So I always like arguing for the good things and arguing against the bad things. So some of it's just going to be ego driven, and that's okay.
I think that, yeah, definitely one of my motivations is that it does personally affect me. But like saying you like to argue, I mean, I do like to argue for the good things, but also I do just like to argue. And if someone says something that's a logical contradiction, there's a part of me which just drives me to hammer that home. It doesn't even matter. Like they'll lay out these 5 premises and they'll all be bullshit, and I'll be like, okay, let's just accept all of them, and now let's just run through and I'll prove that 2 of them contradict each other. So it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't really matter what they are or anything. But I know that I can drill you in on this, and then I waste so many hours. I get like caught in this like spiral where I have to. I know that there's a logical contradiction, and you just show it to them, and then everything will be cured. And I definitely think I'm addicted to that in a way, which
It's no, that I definitely see it. Like it's a little bit fun to be like really into something. It's really fun to like get into a heated argument, get really passionate about something. There's almost a little bit of like fun to be had in outrage, you know.
yeah, being angry
Something that
feels good. Yeah,
being it feels good. It gives you a sense of purpose and drive. Something that has repeatedly also come up in the research is that 2 things predict actionable social change, and sympathy is not one of them. Just feeling bad, just recognizing the plight of a group or something like that is not enough to drive people to want to go out and advocate for something or go out and want to like, engage in actionable social change. The
yeah,
2 things are existential guilt. You have to feel really bad for your role in the current system in order to want to change it, or moral outrage. And of course, the haves, I'm saying a group, you got haves and have nots. The haves typically feel the existential guilt for like damage they've caused, and then the have-nots have that moral outrage. It is, and this is another thing in a long line of factors that make advocacy for the left so difficult, is that moral outrage that is driving you to engage in that actionable social change is very hard to maintain for long periods of time. People get burnout. People get fatigued. It is hard to believe in something for so long and to do so many things, and just no one person, no one action, no one protest is ever going to tear down the entire system. It's just not going to happen. That's not how it works. The system is not one thing, and so
right.
no one thing you do can like get rid of it. Short of like I don't know, Thanos snap or something like that. Thanos snap wouldn't even do it. That's still half the system. So
I haven't actually seen any superhero films. If that's
I have it
superhero
beyond
film.
the memes. So
Okay.
we've all absorbed that through cultural osmosis, though, because systems are complicated and we absorb things like that.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess on the burnout thing, like that's a bad thing in when you're looking at it from the point of view of like yourself advocating for good things. But then I guess in another way for certain topics that could actually be a good thing, because like for example with the like gay panic in the 80s and 90s and the trans panic now, how long can the media actually care? Like there must be so many people now who are just so sick of trans issues. A load of cis people who don't know any trans people, they don't really care about it, and every single thing has to have some tedious person being offended about trans people. It's so boring, and they like. I just feel like their whole thing is outrage. Like the whole thing is like, oh, there's a man in your toilets or whatever. That it's just outrage. The whole position is 100% outrage. So that's got to wear off. Whereas from my point of view, for sure, it's incredibly draining and hard to keep going sometimes and stuff, but it's not like I can opt out. I can't get just bored of being trans. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
So, it's very draining and it's horrible, but trans people aren't going away. And in 40 years, are they still going to be making, well, of course they're still going to be making the same shit arguments, but are so many people going to care about them? So perhaps not, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's usually where it's going to lead. It's hard to keep that sustained moral outrage over a group of people who you have to exist within society, unless you dehumanize them to the point where we enter fascistic territory.
Yeah.
So, which is scary to think of. I'm not trying to. I don't want to like fearmonger too much about
For
that.
sure.
But you bring up a really, really good point. A lot of like the gay panic went away because gay people started to exist, and none of the things that they said were going to happen really came true. Same thing with trans people. hopefully what's going to happen, they're going to realize that trans people peeing and pooping is not any grosser for them than it is for cis people. It's equally as gross. Pee and poop is just going to be gross, and they need a place to do it, and it's not going to result in the horrible things that they're fear mongering about with absolutely no basis in reality. The hard part is there's two hard parts about that. Is one, facts and data. I mean, you sent me something earlier today that said as much, like facts, data, and studies that say as much, that say that transitioning is good for kids and adults alike, that say that there's absolutely no empirical basis for this trans panic in the bathroom, don't seem to convince people, because that moral outrage is coming from somewhere that is not in their rational brain.
For sure. I mean, I point that out so much. Sorry, do you want to say the second thing before I steer you off?
The second thing is, and this is why finding that motivation to keep on with activism, or at least not to give up. There's a difference between like continuing for sustained activism and giving up. It's because the default, fuck it, I give up, I'm not listening to politics position, is a conservative one.
Yeah.
There's studies that say that under cognitive load, liberals, and that's just, they only have liberals and conservatives in scientific studies, but still, liberals are way better than conservatives, at least in social issues, right?
Usually.
The under cognitive load, they will default to conservative positions. As in, like when they have to think too much and they're being overwhelmed, they'll default to conservative positions because it's easier. It is scientifically, it is easier to have conservative positions because it requires less thought. That's why people do it. That's the entire reason of justifying the status quo, because it's one less thing you got to think about.
I definitely feel the draw to it. I think, I mean, it's obviously you can only compare yourself to watching other people, and maybe everyone feels like this to an extent. But I think naturally I'm like a very elitist person, and like very judgmental. And I think when I was much younger, I probably had a lot more conservative views because I didn't know about these things. And there would often be things I remember very explicitly thinking when I was in year 6, which is when you're 10 or something, just thinking, well, they should have the death penalty on all crime, because I'm never gonna who would steal something that's just disgusting? Just kill everyone, of course. And that kind of made sense to me because it's just an easy gut reaction, stupid position that you have as a 10-year-old, and it took so much more understanding to realize why that's so bullshit. And now I do kind of recognize sometimes when I take these positions, reactionary positions, I don't necessarily know they're definitely wrong, because maybe some reactionary positions on some issues are the correct ones, but I can feel it sometimes oh, I know what I'm doing here. I'm taking this elitist, reactionary shithead position, and at the very least I need to disengage from actively supporting that position until I've verified it or whatever.
Yeah, it's very, very, very easy to default to these really simplistic black and white answers. So I'll give you two examples for personal examples. I was never a right-leaning person past the time where I actually thought about politics. I was a Republican in elementary school because that's when everyone else was, but I don't know what that meant, so I don't count that.
Yeah.
But what I was not I want to say lefty in college.
Because college turns everyone into liberals.
It does. It happened. I was liberal going in though, but still pretty much on the left. So thought racism was bad. Thought gay people are human. The extreme leftist Marxist positions in society, and still whenever I would think about the Middle East, and that's all I knew. The Middle East, bad stuff's happening. I think that was my level of knowledge. I would default to, well, let's just carpet the Middle East. Let's just be done with it. Get rid of it all. I'm not going to do anything to get you in trouble, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
And there's another example that I still think of, when I'm more arguing with TERFs or Trump supporters online, and I see the things they post. It is really easy to default to a position that oh, the only way to be a Trump supporter is to be dumb or mean. You have to be both of them, because it's just easy to think about. It's easy to just simplify things in those terms and think in that black and white area. Even I'm using a leftist position to do it. It's still a very conservative, very reactionary mode of thought to think about other human beings in those black and white terms. Because man, it is so hard to have human empathy and to work on it when you see a lot of people advocating for these horrendous things. It is hard
Oh, but yeah, I
to
think
keep up with a lot of those principles that I want to try to keep. That, human empathy for everybody, everybody deserves the healthcare, everybody deserves to live their best life. We're all people. It's hard to keep that up. It's
I
hard.
think one of the things that I'm quite naturally good at is disassociating a bit from the argument and then giving people like the benefit of the doubt, I guess emotionally and also just in general. And when you see 100 people in a row who have the exact same stupid hashtags in their name and the same profile picture style and everything, and they come at you saying the same dog whistle phrases and they follow all the same people, it's so easy to just put them in a box and just be like, this person is a lost cause, I'm going to be horrible to them or whatever. And everyone does that to an extent, but I think
There's a term. Yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead.
were you going to say there's a term for it?
Well, it's a term that I'm sure I just heard of this term a little while ago, but the thought terminating cliche.
Right.
God,
Yeah.
I love that term. I love that term for a concept that I think is perfect, because you just put someone into that box. That way you can it shuts down conversation because
Yeah.
they're the bad thing. I don't have to listen to it anymore. I get to go on with my day.
Oh, yeah, I can see people doing that, like to me in real time sometimes. There'll be someone who'll make this argument, and then I'll come in and I'll say, this argument has to be false because it relies on these three premises. All three premises are false, but they also contradict each other. And then someone underneath will put like, she's a man. And then everyone will just be like, oh, well, then I won't listen anymore. And they just people will block me off that and like don't engage with it at all. And they've obviously just got this little like, oh, well, if you're a trans right activist, then I can disregard everything you say.
Yeah, you must have motivated reasonings.
Yeah.
You can't care about these things because it's factual.
Yeah.
Or because there's mountains of empirical data supported. It must be because you have skin in the game and you're just being selfish.
It's not like I only transitioned because I did a load of research. It must be the other way around. But yeah, I think I do, it is very easy to do that yourself. And that's one of the things that I think perhaps this year I've lost a bit more patience on is I spent a long time arguing with people, not just like combatively publicly, but like in DMs, one-on-one. And I have this kind of idea that there's lots of different ways to try and change people's minds. And for sure, having big public debates with figures and stuff can plant some seeds, and having more localized public debates and discussions on Twitter can too. But I just felt like if I could just meet someone, if I could live with someone for 3 years, I could change their mind on trans rights from like any extreme position to a sensible one. So I just spent a lot of time like discussing with people and doing a different kind of debate, I guess. And I'm so burnt out from it because, over 90% of them go nowhere, and they can use hundreds of hours of your life up. And you obviously engage more emotionally when it's like private and when it's just one person. And the more emotion you engage in something, the much more draining it is, and it's so soul destroying. Yeah, and I think that's something I burn out on. And when you burn out on that, like giving people the benefit of the doubt and stuff, then it's so much more easy to just put them in a box and react to them as a concept rather than a person.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to like pretend I'm on my big high horse. Like I don't use Twitter for dunking like everyone else does. So nice little hypocritical statement from Justin coming over here. But yeah, I think it just comes down to Laban brought this up in the chat a little bit. It's like there is a legitimate argument to be made that just stopping engaging. Is that correct? Grammatically correct?
I guess. Stop.
If you stop engaging with a person, that could be a form of like pulling back. That could be good for your mental health. Because fighting back and forth in notifications for 2.5 hours on Twitter at 3 o'clock in the morning is usually not the best use of your time for advocacy or for your mental state. And sometimes those two things pull away from each other. It can be very draining emotionally, very draining mentally to be constantly on about your social justice issues. But you rightfully think that they're incredibly important. And so you have that drive to fight for them. A lot of it has to do just recognizing that you by yourself will not change everything. It's not that you won't change anything, it's that you by yourself will not change everything. It's part of like understanding the concepts of the broadest of systems and the point of advocacy in the first place. Like if you could do it all on your own, you wouldn't be trying to change the minds of other people, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So picking your battles, recognizing like where your possible wins are going to come from, and stepping back from the ones that are just not going to happen, no matter how tempting it may be. I mean, it's never a black and white decision. You're definitely going to make mistakes and engage with people that you shouldn't. By extension, you might like dunk on someone who might have, yeah. But you also got to recognize that you might accidentally dunk on someone who was engaging in good faith and might have wanted to know. So you'll never be perfect.
I think there's two phrases which I'm constantly balancing in my mind, which is pick your battles, which I think is a very good one. Though I think that's very hard to do. I mean, it's easy to do in one sense. Like if someone's wasting your time and you just stop arguing, that is like you picking your battle. But like another way is trying to pick how to battle. Like, is me doing YouTube videos useful? Is me writing Medium articles useful? Is me combating misinformation on Twitter? Like, they're all different battles and they use different energies up and picking them. But anyway, balancing pick your battles against this phrase. Probably no one else says this, and I've never actually said this out loud before, so it's really going to sound really stupid, but the guys who founded Airbnb had this like mantra or something in their office, which was do things that don't scale. And in the like startup world, especially as a tech startup, you're always trying to look to scale things. You know, if you have a database with 10 people, you want it to eventually hold 1 billion people. So you need to be able to scale up, and everything has to scale properly. But they had this idea of, at the start, they were going to do as many non-scalable things as possible. So, for example, when they got their first, 100 sign up, the CEO individually hand-emailed every single one to start a little rapport and, get them a bit more hooked. And it means that you can put in this, extra energy early on to win people over and stuff. And I think when your platform size is you've got 100 followers and you get in an argument with someone, you can do this thing that doesn't scale. You can engage very one-on-one with someone, and potentially in some cases that is the best way to win someone over. And I always had that in my mind early on. I know there are people who are going on TV and making statements, and there are people who are doing these huge arguments and stuff, but also there do need to be people at the grassroots level, having these discussions one-on-one with people and teaching them things. So I was always kind of balancing that, and I think I'm very reluctant to let that go, because sometimes I still see someone and someone will message me and they'll be like, oh, I'm a bit of this and this and this, and I'm like, I know I could invest a lot of energy into this person, and I find it very hard to not and to just be like, here's a link. So, and then I get hooked in and waste all my
The work
energy.
you're able to do as someone with 1 million subscribers looks very, very different than the work you're able to do if you have no subscribers, but you're still involved in the space. But that doesn't mean that one is more valuable than the other, because the person who has the time, who doesn't have this platform, who is able to invest one-on-one resources with talking to individual people, that's going to have a lot more targeted effect than the person barely being a background noise for 1 million people.
Yeah.
So things cannot change without without action in both directions. So if you don't have a platform, that doesn't mean you can't affect change. I think it is. I think I've said this earlier, but I sincerely believe this. It is a dangerous mode of thinking to think that there's no one thing that you can do that's going to change the system. But the system is the amalgamation of all its individual actors. So there's Talcott Parsons' definition of social system: a network of interactions between actors. That's all of them. Every shitpost on Twitter, every body at every protest, every conversation that you have, every purchase that you make, that is part of the system. And everything you do is going to change it. So maybe that's a way to think of it. It's not that you're not changing the system, is that you're changing it a little bit with every little thing you do. And so if you have a small platform, and I keep saying platform because my brain has been poisoned with YouTube, but if you have relatives that you keep in contact with, talk to them. If you have
a small like the dinner table.
yeah, if you have a circle of friends, don't be afraid to rock the boat a little bit and bring up politics. It can be really scary to do, but see what happens. Don't be afraid to when you're allowed to go out aside anymore. Don't be afraid to go to events. Yeah,
I think it's good to accept that no one thing is going to change the system, and that doesn't mean you should just therefore give up. Because I think a lot of people do feel like that. They think, well, my vote isn't going to save the world, so I might as well not bother voting. That's like the classic one of those, isn't it? But obviously like you say, everything can affect it. But then on the other side of someone who like massively overthinks and worries about everything, like me, that also can make me feel like everything I do is important, which is, an exaggeration. Obviously, I know that that's a very sort of egotistical, and I don't actually feel like that. But I know that sometimes small things can have bigger effects. And I just feel like maybe there will be that one time where someone will tweet out some misinformation bullshit and I won't respond to it because I can't be bothered. And then no one will. And someone important will see it and they won't get the counter information. And then they'll go on to be a politician and then they'll put all trans people in jail. And it's so easy to that's like catastrophizing thinking, and I'm quite bad at that. But it is important to balance, everything is important with don't think everything's important. I guess, because that burns me out. I often feel like I have to just keep going because what if I'm the only person on this particular instance that would make the difference? I don't know. That is brilliant.
It's that really weird pull between that moral outrage, but also that passion that just makes you care about these issues in the first place. That makes every action seem incredibly important. That's the motivation for why you continue to do something. Well, at the same time, it can come back and bite you. It can get really discouraging when you keep doing things and nothing's changing, on a broad scale. You see the global scale, but you're only able to enact in a very small part of it, so you can't see the results of your changing. And also, part of being an activist, part of being a vocal, opinionated person online in general, but especially in politics, is that you will mess up, or at the very least, you'll get heavy criticism from people who disagree with you. It's just, and a boon about not taking yourself too seriously. It's just recognizing that if you mess up, just like no one action can completely change the world in a positive way, you can't mess up so bad that you destroy an entire movement, not by yourself.
Right, that's for sure. I mean, I guess that when you're talking about certain movements, then one person isn't going to make a big change. But I guess as you get to smaller and smaller ones, I do feel like there's one trans criminal in particular, which is 90% of the focus of all the UK transphobes. And if they didn't exist, then that would...
They'd find another.
Well, they would, for sure. Yeah, no, definitely. But I agree with that, basically.
Because it's not the person that was the issue. It was we need to find that emotional thing that causes outrage. They would have found something else.
Exactly. And, I mean, the examples that they do have are bad. For sure, and some of them are pretty grim, but I do feel like they could be a lot worse, and that's kind of telling. But probably I'm going to get shredded for saying that, so I shouldn't have said that. No, but there are some pretty horrific things that have happened in human history, and anyway, but so I guess. One of the other things I wanted to touch on was, if you would feel comfortable, have you had anything where you felt, I guess, targeted or had anything kind of bad? I guess maybe I'll start. And I've had So I have been doxxed, which is kind of horrible. That the information's out there and it's for people to piece together. And the piecing together can itself be doxing. And it's kind of just grim that someone hates you that much to do it. I've also been mentioned in this book by Abigail Schreier. I don't know if you've heard of her. She wrote.
I'm gonna read that book.
Yeah, well, okay. Look out for my name, because I'm in that for absolutely no reason other than I guess she just wanted to put my name in there, and now I'm in that forever, and that's kind of horrible. I've had several different people, including a celebrity millionaire, threaten a lawsuit over a tweet, which at the time terrified me because I don't have the time, energy, and moral strength to take some insane millionaire to court. I don't want to do that. And I think all of those things, they're so real. Like I can argue my points fine, and if I was just like a concept, or I was just like a floating brain or whatever, I could argue these things for a lot. But then all of a sudden, when suddenly someone threatens you with a lawsuit, it's so real. I don't know if you've ever had anything like that.
Nothing to that effect, no.
Okay.
Now I do have a few advantages over you though. I'm a dude. I'm white. I'm not an advantage, but white. Being white helps. Being a white dude helps. Being a white cis dude really helps. I don't think I'm obviously from the outset gay, so you have to dig into that just a little bit. So all those things help. Well, I'm not going to be as much of a target as.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that, like for example, doxing trans women is in a way like a quite a trans women specific thing, and it's a bit like getting the nudes of women in general. It's a very targeted thing, and for sure, men's nudes do get leaked, and they are retarded.
Just not with nearly the same veracity, right?
It's people aren't looking
or
for
with the same social consequences.
Exactly, it's all of it. There's more consequences, more like drive for shitheads to do it. It becomes like it's an actual target. Like you become a target just by being a woman in that sense, and you also become a target just by being a trans person. And it does make me feel like I don't know if I often think like, do I want to carry on doing this? Like when my name come up in this book, I just thought like, now forevermore, when anyone searches my name when I'm going to apply for a job, I'm going to be listed as like male activist Katie Montgomery in this fucking nutcase book. It's just like, ugh, it's so tedious. Like the consequences are so personal and not the consequence of my views. Like if it was like Katie Montgomery once said, woodlice are better than ants or something slanderous like that, then I could at least then say the opposite. I could learn better. But when it's just like, here's a piece of information about you as a person, I don't know, it's just kind of horrible to have that kind of thing used as a tool against you.
Mm-hmm. There's no like, part of me wants to say, and this is the very, very privileged, I have suffered no consequences yet part of me, say that you got to fight it, you got to stick it to them. If you quit, they win. But at the same time, the social costs are not mine to experience, and I can never like speak for someone else. Oh, you should just get over it. So the only thing I would say in that situation is that, just like with, just sticking to the same principle that no one thing you ever do will fix the entire world. That also means like you've done things already. You have already made it a positive attempt, a positive contribution to the political zeitgeist with the work that you've already done. So you've done far, far, far more than nothing, which is what more than most people will do. And sometimes you can rest easy knowing that when it came time to do everything, you fought.
Yes, that's one of the things that does keep me going, is the idea that if I have thought about it quite a lot, to be honest, recently. If I just deleted my Twitter and YouTube, then there would be some echo of me, but over the years it would just disappear. But then if I was just, I could live fairly comfortably, have a quite happy life. And then if just suddenly one day it was like, oh, now the Nazis are in power, or, oh, trans women are now banned from existing, or your medication's been taken away. Like, I would feel like why didn't I do something when I could? And so at least I have tried, but I don't know. It's just weighing up this like cost. I guess maybe I'm privileged because I can, to an extent, opt out of it. So that's why I keep thinking about it. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I wish we could have black and white answers.
Yeah,
We could
sorry, I
have
feel like I'm
easy
asking you
answers,
for
yeah.
advice here. Solve all my
Yeah.
problems. No, I was just discussing it, I guess, on the
gotcha.
topic.
Yeah, it's something. I think as you start to gain, if you start to get bigger and bigger, if that's something that you want to do, if you want to take your activism route that is meant to like gain a platforms to speak to a lot of people, that is kind of something you have to ask yourself. Think of the worst thing that could possibly happen, and what level of change would you need to enact before you found that outcome worth it? So it's
That's the interesting
tough.
way of looking at, actually.
Yeah. This is actually what I'm catastrophizing, because I do catastrophizing a lot
Yeah, me
as
too.
well. I start to think like, what is the worst thing that could happen, and then how would I deal with it? Would it be like, so for example, when I debated that Nazi on the Nazi podcast, what's the worst thing that could happen? Oh, someone found like doxes my information, everyone finds it, people know where I live. Okay, then what would I do then?
Nazis turn up at your door, yeah.
Nazis turn up at your door. What could I do then? Are there steps that I could take to make it through that? So, well, yeah, if that's the worst that could happen, and I'm thinking like, and
You're not
it would
imagining
take
hard enough, mate.
I don't know. I mean, short of like getting shot, I don't know. To me, it felt worth it. Maybe I didn't. Maybe my ignorance helped me in that scenario. I didn't imagine hard enough. It's like, it'll be fine. It's just
Yeah.
cavalier attitude towards consequences.
I,
That's my ultimate solution for everybody. Don't worry about consequences. You'll live forever. Push forward.
I think that to an extent, I like do over catastrophize all of this stuff all the time, and then sometimes when it happens, it's not nearly as bad as you imagined. But then at the same time, I do feel like so many times you see like shitheads throwing around, "Oh, I'm going to sue you" on Twitter, and it's always pathetic, and like 99 times out of 100 it comes to nothing. So when you see someone who you like being threatened with a lawsuit, you just think, take him to court, mate. You wipe the floor with him. And then when it happened to me, I was just like, I know for a fact that what I said is 100% true, but I was just imagining all these situations where like the court doesn't recognize it, or like it's just got so much money that it's just gonna drag it out for years and years and years and ruin my life. I was just like, oh, there's too many things. And
Yeah.
it was much more real when it happened. But I don't know. It's all just stacking things up, isn't it? Nothing actually bad has happened. So what's the stress? Carry on.
Yeah, well, what's the stress? Yeah.
So yeah. So another thing, if you still got some time, we're coming up to an hour. I thought, basically, if you have to disappear, you're welcome to disappear. I've got another thing I want to ask about.
Oh, I'm not busy, and I would like to stay distracted for as long as possible.
Okay, wicked. Yeah, with upcoming events. So I've got a few more things to ask, and then perhaps we'll see if there's any questions. So if anyone wants to tag and write my name, tag me in, write a question. Perhaps we'll do some questions. But yeah, wait, what was I just going to say about? Oh yeah, so I know you mentioned to me on Twitter that this is like something you're kind of turning into like a second career, perhaps, or just something you definitely are considering carrying on. So is your goal to become like the ultimate debate bro, or?
Well, just like we were talking about, like debates are super stressful.
Yeah,
Especially that lack of
about
control.
it.
Yeah, that lack of control you have over the outcome. So I do both. I do debates and I do video essays. And the video essays, it's like you have control over every step of the process.
Too much control.
Yeah, too much control. Like you gotta just learn to, like, no, it's okay. The plosive hit the mic on that. You're not gonna re-record it. Just live with it. But in a debate, you have no idea about what the other person is going to do. You have no idea, especially when you're heated in a 2-hour long debate. If you say something stupid, a lot of times, a lot of mistakes that I've made in debates previously is like they just brought up things that I had no idea what they were talking about, and in the moment you can't fact check every. That's why gish galloping is a thing. That's why you say 50 things after one right after another, because it's literally impossible to go against. So it's really, really stressful. And I view debate as more of like, I do think debate is a pretty public debate. I think, especially in an online capacity like this, where I I would say most of the time it's there for spectacle.
Oh
It's
yeah,
people are going in like he's gonna own this person or she's gonna get her butt kicked or something like that. Like it's more akin to a sports match than it is to anything resembling like a intellectual discussion.
Yeah.
There is some utility in that. There is some evidence to say not everything needs a study, but there just so happens to be a study that like you feel real good when your team wins. Like you get a boost in those endorphins and hormones that like lead to like feeling good. And that's sometimes you need that. Sometimes when you're discouraged, like sometimes watching a debate in which like you're the representative from your side just trounces the other side, that can help you feel good. That can help keep you going. That can give you that, yes, we are on the winning team. We can do this.
Though that's a very double-edged sword, because if it
is a very double-edged sword because it can go the other way. The only thing that keeps me going in that front is that I think we have the facts on our side. I think we have morality on our side. It's all about finding the right rhetoric.
Well,
and that's something that you can train.
Potentially,
you can't train facts out of existence. But you can train rhetoric.
Yeah, I think perhaps that's maybe the wrong way to look at it. It's not. I don't feel like facts on my side. I feel like more I'm on the side of facts, which probably sounds like a smart way of rephrasing it.
But no, that's actually a much better way to say it. You're right.
Yeah, because if my particularly with trans issues, I started from a very transphobic position, and very much fought through it all by going really deep dive and, talking to people, reading the facts, understanding what's going on, and all this kind of stuff, and that is what changed my position on it, and I then, another one of my motivations for arguing with people so much, especially at the start, I think it's tailing off now, was to make sure the position I had was the right one. Because if I say something about trans rights that is wrong, factually wrong, someone is going to call me out on it now, 100%. If there's some study that someone can just smash out, or not just one study, but, a whole collection or anything like that, and that's good because then I stop being wrong, and that's the way I try and look at it. If someone comes out with a study saying, oh, we should, lock all trans people in prison, then obviously that isn't something that I want. But I don't think that's going to happen. But if someone comes out with a study that says, oh, this medication should be different or whatever, then that's good because now I'm more correct than I was before. Trying to be skeptical about these positions. But yeah, I do have the confidence when arguing that for lots of the topics that I argue about, that I know more than the person who I'm arguing with, and I'm not really concerned about that. I'm not worried about having the rug pulled out from underneath my feet where they crack out this thing where, oh, I didn't know that, suddenly I'm totally wrong, which I think does happen a lot the other way around. And yeah, and that, I guess, saying about the motivation to do it, to carry on debating, that is another one. When you go and debate, you learn which of your arguments are the strongest and which are the weakest, and that is useful as a sort of a personal
absolutely
thing as well.
Yeah, something that debate does allow you to do is to really hone rhetoric on the spot. So a reason I really, really like comedy is that comedy and debate go hand in hand.
Right.
And that playing off the audience, understanding where they're coming from, seeing what typically gets reactions and what typically doesn't, what typically performs well and what doesn't. I hate to frame it like debate is a performance, but it kind of is. Debate is a performance. But again, there is utility, and there are ways, for example, teaching, making your lecture entertaining. using jokes, using anecdotes that represent a larger point in addition to presenting the data makes people listen more, and also it helps them remember that data better. So there is an honest way to be entertaining, whether it's during a video essay or in a debate. So it is important to realize that you can like have the facts on your side and also make it appealing. But and that's why that's why I still endorse like we should debate people. We should debate everyone, because I think a lot of us have came to our conclusions based on facts more than anyone else, and it's just a matter of, can we make it entertaining?
Yeah, and I think so. That's another thing that I wanted to ask you about. I know that maybe this is more of like, I don't know. I was going to say maybe it's more of a left wing thing, but I do also think it's quite like a feminist and particularly like trans rights position, almost infamously, is like this isn't a debate. Like stop debating whether gay people should get married. Like fuck off, we're the same as you. Stop debating whether women should be able to have bodily autonomy. Like fuck off, we're the same as you. And I do sympathise with that position. And I think at the same time as well, there's this worry of debating people and like legitimising their position. Like the BBC is so bad for it. Like they'll have a climate change expert on and then some prick who knows nothing. And because they framed it as a debate, suddenly it looks like these two positions are equals. And I guess when you're very much like ready to fight literally anyone to an extent, like particularly with this like Milo thing and perhaps some of the other people you debated, like neo-Nazis, I think a lot of left-wing people, feminists, trans people would not just say, I'm not going to debate a Nazi on their own turf, but I think other people shouldn't. I think this is bad for everyone. And like, you must get some kind of flack about
Yeah,
that.
a lot of pushback, and almost all of it is good faith. It is not coming from a like I do listen to that feedback a lot,
Yeah.
and I do think people have a legitimate point to make when they are making it. And I think there's definitely a right and wrong way to engage with people who have abhorrent ideologies. The reason I would justify doing it at all, now, it has to be done in the right way. We can fight over right way, but the reason not to take it off the table is that these discussions are being legitimized, whether we're there or not. A lot of people
Right.
do think that Black people should be kicked out from the United States. A lot of people do think that trans and gay people should just be like somehow like ran out of society. A lot of people do have those opinions, and that discussion is being had. We can either be there for some of it, or we can
Be there for none of it, yeah.
or we can remove ourselves from that conversation and let it happen without us.
That's I'm not criticizing any, but like particularly thinking about trans people here, I'm not criticizing any of the trans people I know who have done this, but I do know that there was this kind of phase in the UK media where our transphobia was ramping up to its, what it is today, and lots of the chat shows and stuff were saying, oh, we want a trans person to debate their humanity against a transphobe. So we'll get the transphobe. And of course, it's easy. All the transphobes want to be on the national news because they want to spread their bullshit. But when they go to all the trans people, like a few of them did it at the start, and it was horrible because you're having to.
Because they got. Yeah, you have to defend your humanity, and additionally, you're going to invite a lot of harassment from those trans people or for the transphobes who are drawing in their audience.
Exactly. So it's a horrible thing to do. So I think there was this kind of like, no, we're not going to debate them, like not just as a self-preservation position, but like as a general philosophical stance. This is the best way forward. Not legitimizing the debate, and all that really meant was it was loads of transphobic cis people on everything. And I when I saw, because my position was much smaller then, and they would have never considered me for any of it, and I saw these like bigger trans people bowing out from it, and I really respected them to take a stand and to know what their value is, and to I think it was the right decision for them. But there was a part of me that was thinking like, but someone has to, because if no one does, then there aren't any trans people. There's just no counterposition. Who's going to offer the counterposition? It's going to be some confused, well-meaning cis person who doesn't know anything about trans stuff. And that's usually what it is, and that's very frustrating. So I really feel like your energy and position in well, someone's got to do it to an extent.
Yeah,
Like
definitely to an extent. There's limits to that, but yeah.
if someone like I don't know, some big podcaster person or whatever's like, do you want to come on and argue your side? Someone who's much bigger than you, then I think there's always at least some positive from that because you're selling your position. But if it's like, oh, some random Nazi shithead with like 1,000 viewers or something, um, you might just be legitimizing them more or giving them more hate, or you might just make yourself a target and not benefit anything. Or
Yeah, I don't have the right answers yet. I wish I did.
yeah,
But
I know,
something
very
something I
difficult
do
balancing it.
know, something I do know is that 1,000 subscriber Nazi, they'll take every single chance they can to speak.
Absolutely, yeah.
They will jump at the bit at any possible platform that they get. Like they are hungry to get their message heard.
Yeah, and the anti-trans crew are just the same. Like,
And
absolutely.
if we don't practice forming the arguments about why we think the way we think, like, so for example, like a lot of people forgot we're all taught that racism was wrong, but they forgot why. And so we lost that ability to argue in detail why racism was wrong. Like, so for example, I don't know if I could debunk a flat earther, not because flat earth is a legitimate ideology, but who's put a lot of thought into that specific topic? A flat earth conspiracy theorist who can make
Yeah.
all these spurious connections, thinking like, oh, have you seen levels? And they have like 19 different studies about like the manufacture of levels, and that means that the earth isn't round.
Yeah.
Like, if
you don't
something
know
doesn't
how
have
to
to be
debunk it. Yeah, definitely. I actually thought that exact thing a while ago. I was watching various internet arguments and stuff because I'm addicted to arguing, and I came across people who were taking flat earthers on, and like basically I went through this phase of doing loads of LGBT, particularly trans stuff, arguing, and it burnt me out, and I wanted to take a step back for a short period of time, but I wanted like some kind of argue to like keep my argument brain like interactive, and so I found like atheist debates, which is something I used to do loads as a teenager, and I kind of got back into that, but I still wanted something like lower, like there's no chance of any kind of stressful thing, just because sometimes it's good to just make yourself feel good, and I ended up watching these flat Earth ones, and there are a lot of arguments. Like you learn a lot of stuff. There's so many different things. Like some of them don't even believe that gravity exists, and they don't just like it's not just like, oh no, there's no such thing as gravity. They've got a whole alternate theory, which is all bullshit. Like hilariously bullshit in so many ways. But if they come at you with like, well, explain pressure differentials, then you'd just be like, I don't know. Gravity's
the average
real?
person who isn't an expert in a lot of these fields, they're not going to know, especially on the spot. They're not going to know.
Definitely.
So we got to build those. We have to have someone in there who is good, who does know the facts, because again, if we show up, we win.
So I think that this might be a pattern that I've just noticed, which is bullshit. But I do feel like several years ago there was this kind of maybe focused around internet reactionaries and right wingers and stuff, that the left is too scared to debate and they won't debate us, and I feel like they had that kind of position in the cultural zeitgeist or whatever you want to call it, in that they're the ones who would debate and everyone else is scared to debate them. And I really feel like that's kind of shifting. I don't know if you felt like the same.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because I remember seeing, like, I don't know, 5 years ago plus, and they would always be like, oh, they're always too scared to debate. And I've seen them recently, like, oh, don't debate them. And I feel like, And I do feel like it's similar in a lot of things. I often think that they're the first in there, and then they lay down all these like rules, and then everyone's a bit worried about them. And then when you actually step up to them and realise that playing at their own game you can win, then all of a sudden they don't want anything to do with that anymore. And I think that's quite a general.
They're scared to debate has always been a rhetorical tactic.
Yeah.
Like it's trying to push that narrative. They're too scared, and that gets into the people's minds that like, oh, their ideas must not be very good if they can't defend them. It's a real thing.
Hmm.
And so now that a lot of people have stepped up to the plate, and now you see the exact opposite. You shouldn't have had that person on. It's irresponsible. Like when Vosh went on Tim Pool, everybody is telling Tim like it was irresponsible of you to have that maniac on. I went
did
on
see
to
that. That was quite funny, that one.
I went on to a podcast called the Unsafe Space Podcast, and the entire comments section is like, "This guy's an idiot. You should never have him back on again."
Yeah.
Maybe
so-
I was an idiot, but still, I thought we were there for
yeah, I
unsafe
mean, I'm not
spaces.
going to have you back on, God. So, like...
Just fair. That's fair. But something that kind of like radicalized me towards this direction, because I still do think of I still very much empathize with that position. Like, yeah, like trans rights, that's not an issue that should be up for debate. Whether Black people are people should not be up for debate, but those are going to happen regardless of us. So I was invited to not MythCon, but the Better Discourse Conference hosted by the MythCon people. Got a lot of pushback. This is a pretty right-wing organization. They had like literal Nazis on, and you went there in person. When we showed up and prepped like crazy, we crushed. Like every single panel where a left-wing person was on was to just knock it out of the park. I don't want to brag about myself too much, but the other person who drove up all there with me, who drove up all the way there with me, a guy by the name of Michael Gonzalez, goes by Liberal Sanity Project, crushed his immigration panel. It was a 3-on-1, 4-on-1 if you include the moderator. Just optically having that person like bantering with the people who like calling these horrible names and like staying on topic and bringing all this data. He looked strong. He looked like a Chad. Just crushed it against these 3 other people, and like that looks good.
Yeah,
so
definitely. And I think as well, like, I know that often they say, like on the debate as a performance thing, that the way in which you like perform it can be more important than the content and stuff for the impression of the person like watching and stuff, but also that affects their views more, perhaps. Like if lots of people absorb their view on social issues like by just seeing how other people react to them. So if most people are okay with homophobia, then they'll just take that position on. And then if you see homophobes being like crushing gay people in debate or whatever, however you want to say it, then it kind of reinforces that for you. But then all of a sudden you see this case where, you know, you're a racist and then you don't really care and you're watching this thing expecting the racist position to win. And then this guy comes on and smashes people 3-on-1 with a load of stuff and immigration and looks like a king doing it. Then that can really make you think like, oh, like, I didn't listen to anything they said, but they definitely crushed in that debate. So maybe that's the correct position that I should have.
You see it happen.
Yeah.
Many people are saying this.
It's good, because that's all personal analysis. So obviously
there is something to be said. You have to, even on a debate stage, something that I did on that stage and that I really, really believe in is like talking to the other person, like finding something out about like what your audience is like. Like if you're going to go do a debate or if you're going to go on a broadcast or something like that, understand their audience and try to appeal to that audience.
Right.
Because the way to affect social change is by using the norms that are already within it. So if you are talking to people who say they believe in egalitarianism, that everyone has an equal chance to succeed in society, appeal to that to show them that actually everything says that isn't true. Where there are things that we could do to further that goal of egalitarianism, but we're not doing it right now. And as an American, or whoever you're targeting, that should you should be outraged about this. This isn't who we are, or something to that effect.
It's like, here's your principle. I'll agree with your principle. Now let's just apply it to this thing. And, so we're both fighting together on this now, right? Mate? Friend? New friend?
Yeah. No one has ever been convinced by, like, no racist has ever been convinced, like, okay, you think racism is okay, but actually, have you considered that racism is bad? No one has ever been convinced like that. It has to go some level deeper. Like, why does this person think racism is okay? Oh, because, we live in a just world and God is real. And so if black people are at the bottom of society, then, and white people are at the top, that must mean that that's just the way God made us. So you have to talk to that person, like appeal to that religious aspect, appeal to the just world position that they hold, and try to make them see the contradictions in their, like, that held belief, that value that they have, and the results of society that they're endorsing.
Yeah, I think one of my favourite and easiest examples of that is when I meet right-wing libertarians who are transphobic, and one of my friends, like real life friends, was right-wing libertarian, and I learnt quite a lot from him and discussing with him about it, and considered it fairly deeply for a while, and so that there were just quite a few very key things that if you present to one of these like right-wing libertarians, then they instantly, they'll agree with it. And you'd like, so are you saying you want the government to step in and say what medicine that you can take? And they'll be like, no. And be like, cool, right, we're agreed on trans healthcare then. They'll be like, no, because this and this. And they'll be like, yeah, but what do you want? Do you want the government to step in? Do you want, like, people telling you how to live your life? And then suddenly they're on board with, this whole thing because you've presented it in a way that they like. Even if you think the whole right-wing libertarianism thing's bullshit, at least, like, you say, well, we should let the market decide what is the best trans healthcare. And they'll be like, yeah. You're like, cool, that's what we've got today anyway. So
yeah, it can feel a little bit gross, but hey, that's,
I think
if you're an advocate, you got to talk to people. You got to convince people, and that means, like, meeting people where they're at.
Yeah, definitely. I think one criticism of that, so I, like, maybe I'm not so much in this space, so this might be a bit of an ignorant criticism, but, like, of the, like, I guess, dirtbag left or whatever, is that often the hey, I'm like you stage involves just being transphobic. Like, you'd be like, right, I'm here to argue for the rights of immigrants. And, like, so that we can be friends, let's just both agree that men in a dress are disgusting. And now we're friends. So we're on the same page. So let's talk about immigration. It's just a bit like...
Yeah, are you appealing to the values that made them a bigot in the first place? Like this flippant dismissal of people's concerns? Or are you trying to appeal to something deeper than that? Like, maybe there's a reason deeper why they're a bigot, because they like that flippant, like, disregard, and they're like, something like that. Maybe go a level deeper. Why do they like being flippant? Why do they like that carefree attitude? Appeal to that and realize that they can still hold on to that without saying the N-word 20 times a day.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, do often feel like sometimes people walk in and they'll be like, "I'll say the N-word too. Now we're friends. Let's have a debate." It's like, well, you haven't really like met them where they're at. You've just...
How do you do, fellow frog people?
Yeah.
I too say the slurs. Now let me talk to you about healthcare.
Yeah, I've definitely witnessed that in action, and it's easy to accidentally concede something which is actually very important to other people that you're, like, privileged to not have to care about. But yeah, I definitely agree about meeting people on their own terms, and that in a way that's where having these private discussions can be better, because if you go on this Nazi podcast and you meet them in the middle in order to win them over, then someone listens and they're like,
to you.
Jangles ScienceLad has said all of this Nazi stuff and he's just making friends with Nazis. That's...
Yeah, obviously it's a bad look.
Yeah.
It's like, I might want to rethink that one, Chief.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think what I've been thinking about as we've talked is, like, the more public you get, the less of that talking to individual people you can really, really do.
Yeah.
Like, because the more you advocate for an issue, the further out you get from that, like, the less you're able to talk to the individual people. So what you're kind of doing is just, like, arming the people who are smaller than you, maybe with the information that they can use in their, like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like that. That's this do things that don't scale thing. So this is where it applies. Like, have all these one-on-one conversations, and then when you get to the point where you can't, write an article and then the people who are smaller than you can then read the article and they can have the one-on-one conversations. And then when writing these individual articles becomes too much, then, you know, like make videos or run for office. I don't know, you know, like it's like steps up and you go to the point where it's no longer a scalable activity.
That's okay though. Lots of people doing non-scalable activities has held meaningful changes. Like that's what that's built on.
Absolutely, yeah. So are you up for some questions?
Sure.
Cool. So I think I don't know if you've got chat up, but I'll read them out anyway. First question is from Miss Tree and says, ask Jangles about his tattoo. So we've seen one on your arm.
This one right here. So this is the Bioshock. This the guy from Bioshock, Jack. There's a tattoo on his wrist. I met my husband at a barbecue in which we just spontaneously we talked about Bioshock, our favorite video game, for like 3 hours.
Amazing.
So yeah, just got to I don't know, got
No,
a
that's
little
cute.
reminder. Yeah.
Does he have a Bioshock tattoo?
He does not. He doesn't like pain.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm gonna have to trick him.
Oh man,
I'll have to surprise him one day.
one of my friends, or several of my friends, got drunk, and one of them tattooed the name of a third person on this guy's back in like a tramp stamp, and they all thought it was hilarious at the time, and I think they kind of still do, but it's like this huge thing. But maybe get him drunk. That might be the best time to do it. No, don't.
There we go.
Okay.
Be like sideways and yeah.
So, Sebastian Bork says, so how do you react to online or offline harassment? Do you get help from the authorities? That is a difficult question. I did have some case last year. We were outside, so it was probably last year, where we had some hate crime, which wasn't violent, but was like on the edge of it being so. And we got out at the right time, and it was really horrific and like quite emotionally horrible. And I wasn't planning to tell the authorities about it at all because I thought it would drag us back through it and nothing's going to happen anyway. And, you know, potentially we're going to come up against some transphobic policemen and, like, you know, you just hear horror stories. And I just thought the cost reward of this just isn't worth it. But I posted about it on Twitter and, like, everyone said report it. And so I did. And, I mean, nothing did come of it. They didn't catch anyone. Didn't encounter an openly transphobic policeman, so that was fine. But I guess I added to a statistic, which is, like, again, like small changes adding up to the system. Like, hate crime in the UK for trans people is up by, like, 400% or so. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the number is, but it's a lot. And my one incident contributed to that, which does then, you know, tell politicians where to direct resources and all this kind of stuff. So, but I didn't report it to the police expecting anything to happen. Like, I didn't go in thinking it would, and so when nothing did, I wasn't surprised. I don't know what the responsible thing to say about this is to other people, because there are situations, as much as, like, you know, certain very anti-police people will disagree, there are some situations for some people where getting the police involved can benefit you and be the right thing to do. And so I wouldn't ever want to say, I personally wouldn't want to ever say, don't ever get them involved for anything. But I totally understand the position of not wanting to do so. Yeah, so that's the answer to that part. So on how do I deal with harassment? Online harassment, when people just writing abusive things about me, I mean, most of it just bounces off. I actually, when I post a selfie and I get like 100 comments on or whatever, I often scroll right down to the bottom to open up the little, like, more shitheads one.
The show more, which is always a treasure trove.
Yeah, and some, like, I honestly love it. Sometimes when I've had a couple of drinks and I go down and someone's written something, like, you can just take them for a ride. Like, it's so easy. They're there because they're offended by me existing. So I've really got the upper hand. So if you go in all chill and, like, all of what they say just clearly it doesn't affect you, then they start getting, like, upset about it. And then, you, like, they're the easiest people. Like, transphobes are the easiest people to offend because they're literally offended by you breathing.
Yeah, the reason to post a harassing comment is to try and exert power over somebody
Yeah,
in some small way.
it's
Like
stop
offending you and
dominance.
making your day a little bit worse, that's the power that they can have over you. And taking that away, and like, oh,
Yeah, I know it is very satisfying. Yeah, it's definitely like some kind of exerting dominance. I definitely agree with that. I mean, they do that all the time, like so bad. And yeah, it is. It's quite satisfying to defeat and to then like totally reverse on them. So that's what I do. And then on offline harassment, like I don't get that much of it. I guess I don't go to many places where that happens. I live in a really good city, and I hang around with metalheads mainly, and metalheads are generally, if you don't hurt me, I don't hurt you, and that's the like whole philosophy. So I'm quite insulated from it. I guess I'm quite lucky with how I appear and how I dress and act and all this kind of stuff. But when it does happen, it's a bit more difficult to deal with because you've got the emotional thing. When someone writes something horrible about your selfie, it's just like words on the screen, and for sure it can upset you emotionally. But when there's someone looking you in the eye and aggressively saying something horrible to you, it's so much more cutting. And basically, genuinely, what happens, I don't react to it at all. Sometimes I reply if that's necessary, and then I just feel shit for 24 hours, and that's my my way of
your
dealing
process.
with it. Yeah, and I don't, I just hope that. Sorry, this is a bit of a monologue and a bit of a detour, but I guess what the position I want to get to with everything in my life is like this security in myself as a person. And I know that if someone walked up to me and laughed at me and tried to make fun of like my eye color or how many teeth I have or something like that is just, I'm just secure about that. What are you doing? It's just embarrassing. And I think when I was younger, I used to be insecure about the music I liked. And so if someone come up and said something like, oh, metal's stupid or whatever, I would have to argue with them because I was all insecure about it. And now, if everyone in the world thought the metal was bad, I honestly, and I know some people say this, but I honestly would not give a shit. People come up and laugh to me about it now. I just don't care. And it's the same with like my position on religion. Like currently, I'm an atheist and I used to be insecure about it, and now I'm very secure about it, and it just doesn't affect me if people disagree with that. And I'm nearly there on trans issues. I think it's newer to me. It's a bit of a bigger deal. So anyway, I'm trying to get to the position where if someone does just come up to me like, oh, you're a man in a dress, just be like, all right, mate. Whatever.
That is the ultimate position that you want to get to.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
It takes a long time. It's not something that you can just decide to do one day. Like
Sure.
anything else. The horrible part about it kind of takes practice.
Yeah, and that is kind of another reason for my arguing is if you go in and you find the transphobes and they call you a man a few times, then eventually it stops mattering.
Yeah, it wasn't true the first 30 times you said it. What makes you think this time's going to be different?
Yeah, and it affects you emotionally the first 30 or 300 or 3,000 times, but eventually it's just meaningless. Yeah, right, okay. Sorry, there's another question. So this is from John Longbow. Do you think that because we on the left are more moderate, we always lose when it comes to fighting for our rights compared to more right-wing ideological groups?
I think that slow march of progress will always be that march of progress will always exist. It just might not be linear. There's always going to be like, yeah. I will say it's always harder. It is always more difficult to advocate for change over the complacency of the status quo. So it's always an uphill battle. So I think we usually win in the long run. What's hard? It's just hard to understand. Like the long run is all there is.
Poppy says hi.
Yeah.
So on this, I guess I have like kind of two views. I mean, optimistically, I try and look at it a bit like Galileo saying that the Earth goes around the sun. Like, you can't once you find that out, people can fight against it very hard, and they can, push back all this progress. But in the end, like it's just true. So you can't fight it off ever. Like, you can make gay people's lives hell for hundreds of years, but like, you're not going to stop them existing. And especially now when we've had this position where they're just so normal it to everyone that it's very difficult to push that back long term. However, on the other hand, sometimes things do go really far backwards. And I think a very good example is the classic Nazi example. Like, I don't know if you know about this, but in the Weimar Republic was the thing before?
Yeah, I forgot the name of the I forgot the name of it. I think I know what you're about to say.
Yeah, so anyway, they had this institute and it was like the most progressive thing on trans issues in the world, and they had so much information that was basically, it was all destroyed by the Nazis. They killed all the trans people there. All the books were burned, and that's like the classic book burning photo. If you search for Nazis book burning, it's of them burning all this LGBT, particularly trans research. And like, we don't know what was there, but it took decades. Potentially now we're still trying to catch up on some of it, like some of these understandings, potentially. And like, that could happen again, potentially. I don't know. The internet makes it different, and we are more progressed now. The scene is very different, but it's the same with like gay rights. I mean, there have been cultures in the past that are exactly the same as we are now on them, and then there's thousands of years of shit in between. So, I mean, maybe in a million years of human evolution, LGBT rights won't be an issue, but there could be thousands of years of wank in between. I don't know. It's very easy to be.
Yeah, it's hard to say like, don't worry, you're you never want to get to the point where you sound like, I know things are horrible now, but 200 years from now they might be okay, and that's why you should feel fine about it. Now, I will say that, like, to use a working out example, because I'm a personal trainer for 10 years. If you stop working out for a while, it's a lot easier to get back into it because you already have laid the foundation. So it's easy to get back than it was to get in the first place. With rights and like civil liberties and things like that, there are going to be periods where they try to push back on those, where they try to strip them back away to restore order to that pathologized past. They love to, but you've established a status quo that existed, and it's in people's heads, and it's a lot harder to prey on the fears of the unknown when you've already seen it.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's hard. Yeah, people know that trans people exist now, and even if they don't like them, even though the terms exist, it's hard to like, well, they're not. I've seen they exist.
Yeah, I think that the representation matters. I think it really does, because there are now films where there are trans people and they're normal, and that sells that idea to people so hard. That's something you learn. I learned everything I knew about trans people from shitty films and Jerry Springer.
Yeah, representation isn't. I would argue it is not just for the people being represented. It's for the people who don't see people like that. Like, I grew up in an all white part of Eastern Kentucky. I did not see a single black person that I could remember until I was in high school. This is not a joke. But you know what I did see? I saw Gerald from Hey Arnold. I saw like a couple shows on Nick Jr. that I can't remember the names of, but I still saw them. I saw Space Jam, Michael Jordan. So that representation, yeah.
In one sense, that's like, it's great that, I mean, for me, in coming out, the thing that like broke me was just discovering a trans person on YouTube who was just a normal person. And that was like the point at which it broke down this idea that I'd been sold, that all trans people were perverts and mental and weirdos and all this kind of stuff. And suddenly, that dispelled it all. And it's great that you can watch a cartoon like Hey Arnold and kind of have that broken down in a way about something like that. But then on the other hand, that's such a hilarious...
No, I understand what you're saying.
A hilarious, quotable thing, like, Jangles' his only view on black people is from Space Jam. It's like racist in itself. But like, I do know what you mean.
That'll be the clip after this, and that's fine.
I think that, those like casual representation things do make a big difference, and I know that they would have made a massive difference to me as a kid. If Hey Arnold had a trans character in who was as normal, like that could have changed my life, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, yeah, who knows? But yeah, so whoever's out there writing cartoons now, who's obviously subscribed to my channel, please put a trans character in your cartoon.
Keep fighting for that representation. I know it's tough. I know that there's way more politics keeping the trans people out than there is in putting them in, but keep doing it.
Yeah, definitely. So do we have any other questions? This is your last chance for asking questions. So we'll just see if any other question comes in, but do you have any sort of closing thoughts or any topics that we didn't touch on that you wanted to bring up, or any of your research, like going into this? He was saying about you should go and watch his latest video because it's like related to this. And you were saying that you did like tens of research items for every single sentence, pretty much. You can't cover it all, so do you just want to like slam out some research?
I think I went over what I wanted to get over regarding our topics. I'm sure I'm forgetting something.
Yeah,
I don't have my notes in front of me that are written down, but yeah, did a research. I did a video with a ton of research in it on systems and system justification theory, and it is hard to care. It's hard enough just to care consistently about social issues or economic issues or anything surrounding like making the world a better place. It is hard to consistently care. I think knowing that going in and knowing that you're going to have to put up a lot with overt bigotry as well as complacency, and they're both frustrating in their own ways. Knowing that going in will help you better prepare for it.
Yes,
You
definitely.
are stronger than you think you are. You can put up, just like society can deal with having new things come in. Like you can deal with these new experiences. You can deal and become a stronger person based on the like adversity that you've encountered by caring about these social issues, because that's how things change. It's people caring and speaking up about it. That's how the world becomes a better place. When we all have our part in it, big and small. The small things are where it's at, though. That the small day-to-day interactions that you do, the single people that you talk to, that's the foundation, which everything else is laid on top.
Definitely. Do things that don't scale. I'm going to try and make that work. Let's see if... yeah, sorry. Anyway, I was just checking for the questions. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that it's easy to feel powerless and give up, and that's not necessarily the best reaction. And that's why I think you should watch your latest video, which will help explain that. So...
Plug.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, okay, I don't think we've got any questions that I'm tagged in. So I think my closing thought is, wood lice are crustaceans and they're born with 12 legs, and when they mature, they grow 2 more legs, so they have 14. Isn't that exciting?
Where do the legs grow? Like, where do the extra legs come from? The back two?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
know
know.
how I
Imagine
feel about
evolving
that.
that. Imagine being like, well, you know, there's a lot of evolutionary pressure on here to only have 12 legs when you're born because like 14's too many. But then with just 2 more. Let's do it.
No, I just love, like, you know what? I got 12 legs. They don't understand what's going on. I got 12. It's not enough. I can do more. I can have more.
But just 2 more. Like, obviously it's going to change your life. And also just like,
Yeah, you don't go crazy with it.
I love imagining all these weird animal like things if they're in humans. Like, you know, because in humans it's like, oh, have your adult teeth come through yet? Like, that's the thing. And other like aliens are probably like, your teeth fall out, it's disgusting. Then you have more. But like, imagine if humans were like, oh, have your adult legs come in yet? The last
Your adult legs come in yet?
like, oh, they just have little feet poking out, they're growing through. Yeah, anyway, cool. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for this hour and a half long discussion about wood lice. If you just tuned in, that's what we've been talking about the whole time. It'd be great.
You had a lot to say about it. It was incredible.
You have no idea. Yeah, anyway, so definitely subscribe and follow and all this blah, blah, blah. And write some comments and stuff. And cool. It'd be great to see you all soon. Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone. It was fun.